Oh, is it already live?
Yeah.
So you're going to have to edit this out if I
Yeah.
don't just stop now.
Yeah, but
So just checking to see how my latest tweet is doing is not what you want on this video. It's just wasting film.
It's going to be in the blooper reel, I guess.
How
was your latest tweet doing, Mark?
Well, there was an announcement today. I got to actually break in-person news, and it's that TerraPower is exploring building a fleet of their liquid sodium reactors rather than just one.
Yeah.
Exciting.
I saw that MOU for an additional 5. Do MOUs mean anything?
They're nice, and serious people have to be careful before putting things into writing, even if that writing is not binding them to action.
Yeah.
I would say the importance of this is that we have a utility, a big utility, owned by Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett has done extremely good business in wind and has never wanted to do business in nuclear. So to have a utility with an expiring coal fleet that would either need to be rebuilt or retired, to be that interested in a fleet of identical reactors starts to smell like a nuclear program.
Warren Buffett explicitly has said the only reason to build wind turbines is for the tax credit. Do you think that's the only reason to build nuclear plants?
Well, if he was only building it for the tax credits, fine. Presumably he and his buddy Bill Gates have talked in serious depth about nuclear and what it would take to get it built. And I would assume that whatever his intentions, he wouldn't do it unless it was smart for his companies.
Man, well, yeah, it's super exciting. Let's rewind a little bit. This is, for many people who are watching this might know, not the first time Mark and I have ever met. Our origin story goes all the way back to 2016 in Berkeley, California, or maybe San Francisco, if you want to be really specific about it, at that was it Climate One meeting Michael was speaking at?
Yeah, there was a debate on whether Diablo Canyon nuclear plant should be closed. And all the best paid, best educated, smartest people in California were saying, of course we should shut down our most reliable, secure, clean generation. That tells you a little bit about California, but we have to give California credit. Some of those very same people are out there now saying why it's important to keep Diablo Canyon open. It's just in 2016 where our story begins. That's right. They were excoriating Michael Schellenberger for being so dumb as to support its continued operation.
Yeah.
So we met that night at the Commonwealth Club debate in San Francisco. And then a few short weeks later, I was the next member of your staff. I was joining Michael Schellenberger and Eric Meyer in Berkeley, California at the brand new environmental nonprofit, Environmental Progress.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was that night that I implored Michael to hire you. And he's like, really? Doesn't he have a little too much energy?
Okay, so I'm being confronted with this story for the first time. Way to go throw Michael under a bus there, but
yeah,
a lot of energy ended up being required because a lot of people, a lot of very smart, credentialed, again, well-educated people knew that the number one most important thing to do was to make sure nuclear plants closed. This was the period leading up to our current energy crisis, in case you're wondering what our brilliant leaders did to get us into an energy crisis.
Right. So yeah, here we are 6 years later. Maybe paint with the broadest strokes you can what brought us from there to here.
So in 2016, internet communities celebrating nuclear were still in the larval stage. They were just getting going. And there was a lot of attention on nuclear for some of the worst reasons, because there had been a triple meltdown at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant after the earthquake and tsunami. And that earthquake and tsunami hit Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant right as fracking was starting to take off in America and to produce copious quantities of extra natural gas. And by extra natural gas, what I mean is there weren't yet markets for that gas. For a lot of it, was considered a bit of a luxury fuel, just a side effect of exploring for oil, in the words of some oil men. And suddenly there was so much gas that the way to make sure you had customers for that gas was to help kill nuclear plants.
Yeah.
And so from 2016 to 17, 18, 19, 20, even to 2021, in the United States and around the world, I and Environmental Progress and you and others in our movement were desperately trying to avoid the shutdown of these incredible treasures, our working nuclear plants.
Yeah.
And these nuclear plants were being shut down, some cases because of cheap natural gas. So for example, in the Midwest states of the United States, and they were being shut down in other places just because of politics. That'd be like California and New England, and then Germany and Belgium and France.
Would you put New York in that category as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The nuclear plants closed outside of New York City were just essential for the long-term energy health of that region. They're shut down, and New York and other states up past New York are going to have a really bad set of winters from here until, I don't know. I don't really see an end point for when the winters won't be dangerous, because they don't have enough natural gas pipelines, but they rely on the natural gas because they shut down the reliable non-natural gas energy from nuclear.
What's the earliest you could imagine new nuclear in the state of New York?
On one hand, I think it does depend on just how bad those winters get. There's a lot of people suddenly discovering the truth about energy because of this crisis. That the reliability portion of it is almost as important as it being there at all. And that in the long run, the only insulation for rising fossil fuel prices, erratic fossil fuel prices, or erratic weather is uranium-based energy. You just have to have that low volatility, low fuel consumption nuclear energy installed in enough quantity that whatever extra gas you have to purchase when there isn't enough renewables doesn't ruin you. So I don't know. I guess if the winters are bad, if you're forcing me to answer a question, if they're bad enough, maybe we might see one of the first revival jobs in a U.S. nuclear plant. I don't know. There's a lot of damage being done to those units at Indian Point. A lot of damage.
Yeah.
And it's not clear if we can repair those. But if attitudes change and we consider even very small nuclear that maybe gets built faster than in the past, if that's possible, then before the end of the decade.
Yeah. Man, yeah, it's when you think of how much trouble they've been having permitting pipelines, you start to think, well, could it potentially be easier to put new nuclear down?
Well, you would hope in some ways, because pipelines are so-called linear infrastructure. It means you've got to have every point along the route say yes, or be forced to say yes, or you can't have any of the route. And with nuclear, you're going to be working with the existing grid. You don't have to build a super grid if you just build nuclear plants. Just build the lines right to the plant, or you just add at the plants that already exist. So that maybe if you target new nuclear at existing nuclear plants in New York, it's not going to solve it downstate because they've killed all their nuclear plants. Genius as they are. You would need to put it at the northern nuclear plants up along the Great Lakes, and then you would think that those already living around those plants for the last 40 or 50 years would be okay with more units there.
I remember when we were up there, they certainly were, and they're interested in SMRs, in MSRs. So I imagine they'd still be very supportive. But yeah, we'll see if the government of New York steps up. But so back to the international scene here. We're at the IAEA conference. The IAEA Ministerial. We've heard national statements from several dozen countries now. There's a lot of powerful people here making big decisions about the future of their country's energy. What, if you were in their position, what might you do at this juncture to ensure we have the energy that we need for the future?
Well, I'm here at this conference as a guest from the folks at ENEC, the Emirates Nuclear Energy Corporation. I had done some podcasts on technical subjects, and they said they liked it, and they asked if I wanted to come. And what the United Arab Emirates did to get a nuclear program is they took a little bit of extra time at the start, and they wrote a roadmap. And this roadmap has since become famous in the industry for being almost like a secret code, a password. You unlock and then you get a good nuclear program. Well, as anyone from ENEC would tell you, that roadmap was a roadmap for the UAE based on the strengths and the weaknesses of the UAE as of the mid-2000s. And that roadmap has been stuck to, but added on to where needed. And they've executed it so well, and the roadmap was so well designed in the early stages that they've been opening 1 reactor per year for the past 3 years. They're going to open another one next year, hopefully before COP28 in Abu Dhabi. And then they will have had, at a stroke, 25% of their electricity replaced with nuclear energy. And if they want, that roadmap should be mostly ready to do again for the parts that need to be repeated, to double it, to have another 25% or 50%. And it won't take that extra 3 or 4 years at the start this time if they do that. So when I heard about this, I thought, what countries need is their own roadmaps. You can't just take the UAE's brilliantly successful roadmap and apply it to Ghana. Ghana has its own strengths and weaknesses. It has its own ambitions. It has its own cultural traits. It will need a roadmap written by Ghanaians for Ghanaians to execute a nuclear energy program. And they're certainly working very hard on it. I've been impressed with the folks I've talked to in Ghana and meeting a lot of them here at this meeting. I think that if there was a way to fund a roadmap writing process for any country wanting to embark on their nuclear energy journey, that would rapidly accelerate the long-term future, the arrival of the long-term future of nuclear. It would make some places go a little bit slower, but in a lot of countries, if that funding were there at the front, a nuclear program is expensive. It's valuable, but it's expensive, right? If you have just that little bit of project development funding in the early days to get the absolute best people from the country in question and from helping hands from outside of the country, people who have been there, who have developed entire nuclear programs, then that roadmap process, if funded properly, could see peaceful, safe, since we're at IAEA and we like to use those words, peaceful, safe nuclear spread around the world with a high degree of reliability.
What would be a few bullet points on that roadmap?
Well, that's the start of the roadmap process.
Come up with the bullet points.
Page 1, table of contents. Well, it would be what agencies need to be set up. What is the best practices for staffing? What is the expected funding? What is the timing when you need each agency to be ready to go? How to create a process to build those agencies, how to create a process for staffing those agencies, how to set up your choice of nuclear energy, how to review and assess the suitability of different nuclear technologies existing and emerging for your country, how to evaluate the technical readiness level of your utility, your grid, and say even like your civil service to administer a nuclear program. Probably lots of contact with other roadmaps that were successful, like the UAE's, probably lots of site visits to nuclear facilities around the world. You would want to get human capital starting to be developed very, very early. I know that's a cold phrase. Some people don't like it. You want talented young people, talented mid-career people, and talented late-career people, all seeing this as the ultimate thing they could do for their own careers and for their country. And if they're interested in climate change and not only developing their economies, then also their future.
So we're talking about a 15-year roadmap. Many countries see the turnover of their elected officials in less than 10. How can we ensure that a roadmap would be continued to be followed after political turnover? Any ideas?
That is part of the reason to make this document and this process, that it can be followed and continued by people who believe in it, that it's worthy of being believed in, that you get buy-in from almost everybody you can find that cares about the nation's development, such that when they get elected, when they get ministerial positions, the strength, the cultural strength, the prestige of the roadmap is such that it becomes important to people to follow it and stick with it rather than try to tamper with it, ignore it, or trash it.
Yeah. Oh, man. So let's see. Yesterday we heard from Fatih Birol from the IAEA. I'm glad he's been supportive of nuclear. I'm not sure if that's been true of previous directors of the IAEA. It does seem they're kind of warming up to it. They released a new report today. I'm wondering if you could tell us a few takeaways from what you've seen of it so far.
Sure. I had my team look at it, and I've been here in the conference reviewing their findings. What they've seen is that for the first time, a substantial increase in nuclear is being seen. Not the IEA's predictions themselves, but when they get plans, get stated goals from member states and put those together, those plans are suddenly including a lot more nuclear generation in the future than in previous years. So that's an inflection point, a declared intention from governments around the world to include nuclear as part of their future energy mix.
Are they including enough nuclear to address climate change rapidly enough, to ensure energy security?
I appreciate the question, Eric, but we're about to go to a climate conference where rich countries who can afford it have spent the last year desperately buying up every bit of fossil fuel that can be shipped on the sea or by rail, okay?
Yeah.
So I don't actually myself have a huge amount of patience for a lot of those same countries, same entities, same leaders putting forward claims about what they're totally going to do next year after they get enough coal and forests to burn this year. I just don't have time for that sort of thing. So let me say this. Plans, to me, like the ones collected showing the inflection point in nuclear, to me, they're important for vibes, not much numbers. Although people, there are going to be companies around the world that see that and will want to tool up for this nuclear renaissance if it's coming. So I do appreciate that a number's been attached, but the inflection point, just that going up, I would just look at it in the broadest possible way and say, if we're going to address climate change without the destruction of the rich world and the elimination of the dreams of the developing world, it's going to come through adding nuclear. And we'll go as fast as we are good at adding nuclear, and that's what I'm working towards.
I'm tempted to ask you a little bit of a spicy question. We can cut it out if you don't want, but if you don't want to answer it. But so you've been pretty consistent that the cheapest nuclear is the nuclear that you know how to build, and clearly the evidence is bearing that out. What's your take on the U.S.'s current strategy of maybe a sodium-cooled fast reactor over here, a high-temperature gas reactor over here, a molten salt-cooled solid-fuel TRISO reactor over here? How's this going to go, Mark?
A great nuclear state can and should have advanced reactor programs. Russia and China both have sodium fast reactors. China's getting started up soon from help with their Russian colleagues, and Russia has several active, successfully generating sodium reactor nuclear plants. I think that is an expectation. As Americans, we should have enough hubris and pride and say, yes, we should be a great nuclear nation, and we should have advanced reactor programs. The reason why light water reactors, large, boring light water reactors, are being prioritized is because we know that once they get built, they work extraordinarily well. And there's still a little bit of unknown for other reactor types. We don't know for sure they're going to be able to produce like the light water reactors, and the heavy water reactors up in Canada. Those work incredibly well. And if you're good enough to build a reactor at all, you should be good enough to build the ones we've built in the past or are building around the world. So that would indicate that a very low risk approach is to build reactors that, again, have to be built anyway, whether they're novel or not. And at the point that they turn on, they're going to work well. I think that's very sensible. And if we're serious about energy, serious about climate change, serious about showing up well on a world stage like this one, where other countries have all sorts of reactor capabilities that we've sort of lost or have let expire, then I think we can have more than one program at a time. But it's clear to me that Vogtle plant in Georgia turning on next year, the fuel is loaded in Unit 3. They have finished loading. It's been a long time coming. That is probably going to be a sign that we can learn from what went wrong on that project, correct it as much as possible, and get a program going. I'm looking forward to that moment. And then once it comes, I think it's time to build large light water reactors again.
Think we're going to see some AP1000s in the US? Some additional?
I think so. But again, we need Vogtle Unit 3 to come online. We need to enjoy a little bit of bubbly, not champagne, maybe Prosecco. It's been a long, expensive project. And then we need to see what capabilities are still left in our hands after those reactors come online. How much can truly be standardized? How many of the people who built Vogtle, especially those who were part of the successful sub-projects or successful integration stages, do we have those still working with us? Or can we bring them back? And if we can, that starts to smell like another project to pursue. But as you might imagine, banks and utilities are a little shy at the moment because of how long it's taken to build Vogtle.
I got one more question for you. What do you think are the next big battles for nuclear advocates? What's on the horizon we need to start fighting for if we aren't already yet?
Look, all eyes on Germany and Belgium. Germany and Belgium are about to plunge Europe into an even worse stage of this energy catastrophe. And you know they're not going to just say, oh, well, I guess we're poor and going to die now. They're going to buy up fossil fuels from the nations who are here pleading for that to stop. For the nations here at this conference who are saying we need a nuclear program for the baseload energy. And then the countries like Belgium and Germany who say baseload is a myth. No, it's not a myth. It just was provided with nuclear. Now they're going to do it with coal or gas. That's not going to be allowed, not going to be funded for developing countries. We have got to stop the German and Belgian nuclear phase outs.
And we're not even in the winter yet, but
we're not even in this first winter yet. The next winter is going to be even worse. And the winter after that may be even worse. And each one is making us weaker, not stronger through, I don't know, wisdom of suffering through the cold. I mean, people are going to economize, but industries are going to economize by dying.
How much more are Europeans spending on fossil fuels this year than they were, let's say, 2 years ago?
I've heard several numbers thrown around in the national statements just here at this conference. I'm hearing things like 2 to 200 billion, depending on which size of entity we're talking about in Europe, between a small country versus the whole block. It's on those levels, up to 4, then 19 in the last 2 years. So in the case of Hungary, for example, they said in their speech, 2 billion in 2020, 4 billion in 2021, 19 billion this year.
Oh my God.
That is not
almost 10x increase.
Close to 10x.
Whew. That's a way to make your country poor.
Now, oil has not been quite the same run up, and coal has been a massive run up, but the coal is smaller in many countries' energy mixes now. But it's just not sustainable.
No.
And even though gas prices have momentarily come back down, it's just because of nice weather for a week or two.
It's funny how sustainability has garnered a new meaning now.
Yeah, fair weather sustainability is what we had.
Yeah.
Fair politics sustainability. It wasn't sustainable sustainability.
Right.
True sustainability is going to come from, in my opinion, nuclear energy programs done well.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
No, it's just thanks for having me. And it's good to be here after the coronavirus epidemic, seeing everybody face to face. And there's definitely a new optimism. It is undeniable. And it's not clear whether the generational fears of the Cold War, of Chernobyl, of 3 Mile Island are actually being repeated, even by the tragic events at Fukushima Daiichi, even by the scary news coming out of Ukraine. people aren't responding to it with the same panic, the same, anxiety as those earlier events. I think humanity has become accustomed, a little bit accustomed to living with nuclear technologies. And I think that means that this time will be different, but we have to make it different.
Right. Yeah. Well, amen to that. Let's do this again in another 6 years, maybe sooner.
We'll have some power plants built, hopefully.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Thanks, Mark.